A couple years ago, I made some third-party Legend Scale Transformer buyer guides to help collectors see all the options they have available. However, as more Legend Scale figures are being created throughout the years, those videos I made in the past are becoming pretty outdated. Besides new figures that are missing from that list, I also missed quite a few figures that many people let me know in the comments in my previous videos. So with that being said, I figured it was about time to make an updated buyer's guide for everybody. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Speakerhead, and today we're going to be going over the Autobot portion of my Ultimate Legend Scale Transformers buyer's guide. Now to start this off, for those who follow my community posts, I said a while ago that I'd be taking a break from YouTube content to focus on other things going on in my life. While that still is the case, I really do enjoy making YouTube content, so I wanted to get back to it eventually. That being said, I'm not back to making weekly content or anything, but I am going to be trying to post videos here and there when I can. But if you want to see videos when I make them, make sure to like and subscribe because it really does help out the channel. Like seriously, it helps out a lot more than you guys think. Also, if you want to support me further or just enjoy any of the music you hear during this video, you can go check out my music label, Speakerhead Studios. This is a royalty-free and DMCA-free music label I created to help creators get some high-quality music for their content without having to worry about any sort of copyright claims. Currently, we have over 15 lo-fi hip-hop songs available and about 15 EDM songs available, with more music added to the label frequently. All the music is available on most music platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, and so on. Music is honestly something I'm really passionate about, so if you want to support me on my music journey, you can go check out all those links in the description below. But with that self-promo out of the way, let's actually get into this Legend Scale buyer's guide. Now for those who have seen my other buyer guides, this video is essentially going to be structured the same exact way. The main difference of these guides compared to my previous guides is that these guides will also include very stylized figures as well. In my previous buyer guides, you all let me know that I did miss a lot of Legend Scale figures in my guides. But the reason why I excluded a lot of those figures is because I was trying to stick to a very G1 style for that guide. However, in these guides, I plan on adding every single Legend Scale Transformer figure I could possibly find on the internet. Finally, the last thing I do want to mention is the only figures I will be excluding from this list are any repaints of any figures. I had to do this specifically because New Age comes out with at least 5 different variants of each of their figures, so I really didn't want to add like an extra 100 figures to this list. But if you are interested in repaints, Deluxe Baldwin pretty much collects every single variant of New Age figure out there, so he would most likely have a review on that, so I'll link him down in the description below. But with all that out of the way, let's actually get into the buyer's guide. And to start this off, we'll be going through the Season 1 Autobots. So starting with Optimus Prime, we have an option from New Age, 2 options from Magic Square, an option from Hot Soldiers aka McFan's Toys, an option for DX9, and then finally an option from Iron Factory. Moving on to Bumblebee, we have 2 options from New Age, and an option from Magic Square. Talking about Cliffjumper, now you have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, and finally an option from Iron Factory. For Ironhide, you have 2 options from New Age, an option from Magic Square, an option for DX9, and an option from Iron Factory. And then one final option you could do if you really want to is you could use the Hasbro Core Class Ironhide from the Studio Series line. However, it is a little bit smaller than all the other Ironhide options I already mentioned. Talking about his counterpart Ratchet now, you have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, an option for DX9, and a Samurai version from Iron Factory. And just like with Ironhide, if you really want to, you can use the Hasbro Core Class Ratchet, but it's a little bit smaller than all the other options I already mentioned. Moving on to Sideswipe, you have an option from Magic Square, an option from McFan's Toys, which I have been corrected in the comments that this is not just a KO of the Magic Square version, and then 2 options from Iron Factory. Talking about Sunstreaker now, a correction I have to make from my previous videos is that I wasn't sure if the McFan's Toys version was out, but it has actually not ever been released, so that is confirmed not released and not out. That being said, the only options for a Legend Scale Sunstreaker are going to be the 2 options from Iron Factory. Talking about Jazz, you have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, and finally an option from Iron Factory. Moving along to Jetfire now, we have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, an option from Iron Factory. Talking about KOs quick, there is a KO oversized version of Iron Factory's Jetfire, and there is a KO version of the New Age Jetfire, but I'm not 100% sure if that's been fully released or not. Now for Mirage, we have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, and finally an option from Iron Factory. For Prowl, he has an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, 2 options from Iron Factory, And then finally an option from Iron Trans, which is a KO oversized version of the Magic Square option. Bluestreak also has an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, 2 figures from Iron Factory, and then finally an option from Iron Trans. Talking about Brawn now, we have an option from New Age, and also an option from Iron Factory. When it comes to Hound, we have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, and finally an option from Iron Factory. Talking about gears, we finally have an option from Magic Square, and then we also have an option from McFan's Toys. Moving on to Huffer now, we have a figure from New Age, a figure from Magic Square, a figure from McFan's Toys, and finally a figure from Iron Factory. When it comes to Trailblazer, he has an option from New Age, he also has an option from Magic Square, and then finally an option from McFan's Toys. Moving on to the Handyman Wheeljack, we have an option from New Age, an option from Iron Factory, and then finally an option made by Toy World. Moving on to Windcharger now, compared to my last guide, we didn't have any sort of figures for him, but now we actually have a couple options available. We have a figure made by New Age, and then we also have a figure made by Magic Square. So now that we're on to the Dinobots, I would normally kind of clump these guys together, but we actually have a lot of different variants of these guys, so we're going to keep them all independent. Starting with Grimlock, we have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, an option from McFan's Toys, an option from Iron Factory, an option from DX9. There's also this Grimlock model kit that you can build, and apparently from what I've been told by other people that it's about the size of Legend scale figures. And then finally there is an oversized KO version of the New Age Grimlock. Now for Slag or Slug, depending on what name you go with, you have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, an option from McFan's Toys, an option from Iron Factory, and finally an option from DX9. Talking about Snarl now, we have an option from McFan's Toys, an option from Iron Factory, and finally an option from DX9. However, considering that Magic Square and New Age are doing the rest of the Dinobots, I don't see why they wouldn't eventually get to this guy. Talking about Sludge now, we have a figure from New Age, a figure from Magic Square, a figure from McFan's Toys, a figure from Iron Factory, and finally a figure from DX9. Moving on to our final Dinobot Swoop, we have an option from New Age, an option from McFan's Toys, an option from Iron Factory, and then once again, finally an option from DX9. So that rounds out all of our figures for the Season 1 cast, so let's move on to the Season 2 cast. Starting off with Beachcomber, we have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, and finally an option from Iron Factory. Talking about Blaster, we have a new option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, McFan's Toys, and then finally an option from Iron Factory. Talking about Cosmos now, we have an option from New Age, and an option from Magic Square. For Hoist, we have a figure from New Age, a figure from Magic Square, and finally a figure from McFan's Toys. Moving on to Grapple now, we have an option from New Age, Magic Square, McFan's Toys, and Iron Factory. Moving on to Grapple's counterpart Inferno, we have an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, an option from McFan's Toys, and finally an option from Iron Factory. Moving on to the big boy Omega Supreme, we have an option from New Age, an option from McFan's Toys, and we also have an option made by Pengu Toys. I know there were some leaked photos a year or so ago of a supposed Magic Square Omega Supreme, but I'm pretty sure those are just leaked photos of the Pengu toy one. I compared those photos to the Pengu Toys version, and they pretty much look identical, so I'm pretty sure it's the same figure. One last thing I'll mention is that there is a company that's trying to make a KO version of the New Age Omega Supreme, but there's literally no information on it. There's not even a picture of it. But moving on from Omega Supreme, we're going to be talking about Perceptor, and he has an option from Magic Square, and then he also has an option from McFan's Toys. Talking about Powerglide now, we have an option from New Age, and also an option from Iron Factory. For Red Alert, we have an option from Magic Square, an option from McFan's Toys, and finally an option from Iron Factory. Now for Seaspray, he has an option from New Age, an option from Magic Square, and then finally an option from Iron Factory. Talking about Smokescreen now, we have an option from New Age. A supposed version that's been released by Magic Square, but I can literally only find one picture of it online and I can't find any sort of listing, so I actually don't even know if this is real or not. 2 options from Iron Factory. And then finally an option from Iron Trans. Talking about the aerial bots in Superion as a whole, the only option we have available at the moment is going to be the Zeta Mini Superion. If you want to add a Skylinks to your collection, you can use the Hasbro option, but it may be a little bit too large for your collection. When it comes to tracks now, the only option we have available is going to be the McFans Toys version. And then Warpath is in the same situation with only having one figure, but this time it's a figure made by Iron Factory. And then to finally end the Season 2 cast, because we're finally going to have a version of them, we're actually going to have an Autobot Spike, and that's going to be made by New Age. So all I personally really know about this figure is that it's going to be sold in a bunch of different parts with a bunch of different other figures, so you got to buy them all and it's going to be some sort of build-a-figure. But essentially, once all the figures get released with all the parts, you'll be able to combine them together and get an Autobot Spike. In the future, I'm hoping they'll just sell the Autobot Spike figure as its own independent figure, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see what New Age does. So with that, that's going to round out our Season 2 characters, so let's finally move on to our Season 3 and beyond characters. Starting off with Hot Rod and Optimus Prime, we have an option for both characters from McFans Toys. And then finally, another option you could use for Hot Rod is going to be the Hasbro Core Class Hot Rod. Talking about Cup now, the only options we're going to have available are going to be the McFans Toys version, and also the DX9 version. For our C, she has a bunch of different options, one coming from New Age, a chibi version coming from Magic Square, a figure from McFans Toys, a figure from Iron Factory, and then finally an option from DX9. Talking about another Fembot, we have Alita 1, and she has a figure from New Age, a figure from McFans Toys, and a figure from Iron Factory. Moving on to Blur, I do want to make a bit of a correction from my previous guide. In the previous guide, we thought there might have been a version coming from McFans Toys since there was a mock-up online of one. However, it's been 2 years, so I'm 99% sure that figure is just not coming out, or at least it's not coming out anytime soon. So really, the only option we have for Blur at this time is going to be the really old version from DX9. For Outback, we have an option from New Age, and an option from Iron Factory. Talking about Pipes now, we have an option from New Age, an option from McFans Toys, and finally an option from Iron Factory. No new addition to this list is going to be Broadside, because McFans Toys is actually making a figure of this guy, which is awesome. Talking about Sprayer now, we have an option from McFans Toys. Then sometime in the future, we should eventually have an option from Iron Factory. For Sandstorm, we finally have an option that's a collaboration between Dr. Wu and McFans Toys. Moving on to Ultra Magnus now, we have an option from New Age, 2 different options from Magic Square, an option from McFans Toys, and finally 2 different versions from Iron Factory. And then moving on to Retgar, the only option we're going to have is going to be from McFans Toys. And then talking about Alpha Trion, we actually do have one figure for him, and that's going to be from Iron Factory. Now for the next figure, it's actually just going to be grouped all together, and that's just going to be all the Headmasters. But the only company that's made any Legend Scale figures of these guys is going to be DX9. And then also McFans Toys, which is just going to be a KO slightly oversized version of the DX9 versions. Moving on now, let's talk about Metroplex. Now in the past, I suggested the only really option you had available to you was going to be the option from Hasbro. However, within the past year, there has been a Metroplex that is Legend Scale that's been released. It's made by this new company called CN Culture. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's a really awesome figure, and I'm so happy we finally have a proper Legend Scale Metroplex to put in our collections. Going off of Metroplex, CN Culture also made all of Metroplex's little mini bots as well. But if you don't want those, Iron Factory did make an option as well. Now to finally end this list, let's talk about Fortress Maximus. So for Fort Max, we really don't have any sort of Legend Scale options available, so if you really do want that character in your collection, you would probably have to go with the Hasbro option. I will mention that there is a much smaller version made by Mastermade. It's a pretty cool stylized figure, and they do have a few other options for other characters such as Metroplex and Omega Supreme. Now, even though these guys are really cool, they are really undersized compared to the Legend Scale combiners we currently have. Plus, some of them are pretty difficult to find, specifically the Omega Supreme. I know that one is extremely difficult to find. But I still decided to throw them in at the end here, just in case anyone was interested in them. But with that last figure, that wraps up the Autobot section of my third-party Legend Scale Transformers Buyer's Guide. Now, if there are any figures that I did miss, let me know in the comments below. I'd really like to know, because that way I can make a pinned comment and add all those to it. Besides letting me know if I missed any figures down below, also let me know if you guys found this guide helpful or not. I'm hoping I can get the Decepticons Buyer's Guide out within a reasonable time after this one, but if you guys do want to see that video, make sure to like and subscribe like I said before. It really does help out the channel. And then finally, once again, if you guys enjoyed any of the music in this video or just want to support me in general, you can check out my royalty-free music label, Speakerhead Studios, and all the links in the description. But that's going to be it for me, guys. I appreciate you checking out this video. I'm hoping I can get some more content out for you guys within a frequent basis here, but I guess we'll see what happens. But like I said, appreciate you guys checking out this video, and I will catch everyone in the next one. Peace!